Hey guys, it's Birdman. Sorry there hasn't been a video in a little bit of time. Just been a little bit busy with work, etc. Had football going on, so just a little bit busy. But I'm coming here today with my Game of Thrones Season 1 review. Now I did go really in depth in the episodes afterwards, so if you're looking for a real in-depth review, go look at those. I'm not saying I'm not going to go in depth here. It's just we can't make this I don't know, 4-hour long episode. So if you're craving a little bit more insight on specific episodes, go check out those episodes, and that could probably help you. But anyways, what we're going to be going over today, just going to take a look at my notes. So we're going to go over a few categories: the story, the performances, the directing, and the rest, which is going to involve the music, cinematography, casting, and a few other things. And then I'll also be giving you a nice conclusion at the end. So I hope you guys enjoy this review, and let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be diving into, the first category I'm going to be rating this on, and I think I'm going to carry over these categories for the reviews of other shows I'm going to be watching. The first category is story, as I said in the intro. Now, the first thing we're going to go over is characters and character development. Better than it's ever been, in my opinion. I mean, I've seen so many shows. I've seen The Walking Dead, which I love The Walking Dead, don't get me wrong. It's probably my favorite show before this. I just can't put anything ahead of Game of Thrones right now, so it's kind of tough. But character development, let's talk about every single character we see. We got Ned, of course. We got the Lannisters. We got all the Starks. There's so many freaking characters. The Dothrakis, Daenerys. All of them develop, right? None of them are static, and if they are static, they're static for a reason, right? They're going to stay this way because that's how they were made, and they've already hit their climax before what we saw. They already have been following their through line. Now, for those of you who don't know what a through line is like your purpose, right? And it's a very old acting thing you look at, like when you're going to go and play a part. You got to figure out, what is the part I'm playing? What is my character's through line? Like, what is his purpose? Now, there's different goals and objectives that you have throughout your life, but what's your main objective? And we have like Ned Stark, who I'm going to focus on now, for just because he's such a well-written character, is his through line is protecting his family and protecting his honor. That's his through line. And there's a pinnacle choice that he gets from Viserys, I think his name is, the eunuch. He gets a pinnacle choice, honor, family, and we figure out his true through line was protecting and loving his family over honor, which there's always something respectable about that, and I think that's relatable as well. The next thing we're going to talk about in story, by the way, character development, it's literally better than I've ever seen it done before, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not one for exaggerating. I'm not one for giving high marks to things that don't deserve high marks. So it is literally the greatest I've ever seen it, and that's not an exaggeration. The narrative of Game of Thrones is so epic in scale. It is better than some beloved classics. And I'm going to hurt some feelings here, I'm sure, but I'm going to make some people really happy. Lord of the Rings, I haven't seen. So, I can't speak on it. I don't know how I haven't seen it, but I can't speak on it. I have read 2 of the books, Hobbit, if you count that one, and Fellowship of the Ring, and I really liked it, but it didn't compare to the scope of Game of Thrones for me. But I'm not even going to touch on Lord of the Rings because I don't know enough, and I don't want to make a ignorant conclusion after I don't know anything about it. The ones I am going to touch on: Star Wars, Star Trek, Harry Potter. These are some of the epic stories that we've all come to love, right? Let me tell you something, Game of Thrones in one season has dethroned it. And in dethroning it, let me explain to you how it has. The narrative goes through 8 different people, right? There's not 8, 4 different people really, and how their stories are all happening at the same time, but leading to one cohesive narrative. But having these 4 different people around the world, these 4 different groups, the Dothrakis, Ned Stark, the Starks back in Winterfell, and Jon Snow, it makes the scope of the world seem real, right? Because just like in the real world, I'm here doing my thing, doing my YouTube channel, working, doing what I need. There's someone over in South Korea who's doing their thing, and sure, he's different, but is he the same? Yeah, and we get to see that put to use very well in Game of Thrones. So I just got to say the narrative here is better than it's ever been, and that's going to be a common theme. As you'll see, the next thing we're talking about for story, we're going to talk about 2 things just because I can really touch on them quickly, is setting I don't have to say anything about setting because you guys see all the spectacular sets and the scopes of everything. The wall. I mean, man, it's done better than Middle-earth. It's done better than Hogwarts. It's better than it's ever been. Just like I said, it's crazy. I can't believe George R.R. Martin and the creators of this show have made such a great world. And on top of that, let's touch on the depth. There's no more in-depth piece of media than this. We can dig into it from every aspect, and you get this in video games a lot, like Skyrim with the Elder Scrolls. You can dig into the lore, but not in TV or movies. Maybe Star Wars. Star Wars is good with that. They add a lot of depth, but the thing is, you can just dig in. There's history. It's like a real world, man, and that is just... I'm just going to give my final rating for the story here. It's a 10 out of 10. And this is after season 1, so I can't wait to see how much bigger it gets. Rarely do we get stories that are 10 out of 10. I would consider Star Wars a 10 out of 10 story. Man, there's not many. There's not many of them. There's very rare 10 out of 10 stories, especially in this fantasy setting, that are real. And Game of Thrones is a 10 out of 10 story. I can already tell by the first season. So the second category we're going to be talking about is perhaps my bread and butter. I'm an actor. I'm an aspiring actor. I've acted a lot. And in order for me to enjoy a show, it could have fantastic directing, a great story. If it's poorly acted, there's no way I'm enjoying it, just because that's what I'm nitpicky about. And if I'm talking about, this is actually going to be quicker than you think, just because it's so easy for me to sum up how well acted this show is. So let me talk about the overall acting that we get. Go down the list, right? Go down from who is the main character season 1, probably Ned Stark, maybe Daenerys. Go from there down to the least, I mean, a character that still has lines but isn't very, like, prominent yet. Still important, because all characters are important. That's another great reason why the narrative works so well. But we go down the line, right? So we got Ned Stark, phenomenal actor. Let's go to someone who's a big character but doesn't have much speaking parts, right? Like Bran. Huge character. Arya, huge character, but they don't have the most speaking parts. They're phenomenal, and they're kids, man. I don't know whether to put this in the acting category, the directing category, because a big part of being a director is getting the best out of actors. And this is why directors like Steven Spielberg are so successful with childhood movies, is because they get these phenomenal performances out of children. I don't know if the director of the show, I don't know if he's up to Steven Spielberg levels. It looks like he could be, but man, these kids were good acted. I'm talking bottom to top. This is the most well-acted TV show I've ever seen. Now, obviously, we got movies like The Godfather, American Beauty with like Kevin Spacey, Marlon Brando, etc. Like, those performances are once in a lifetime. Laurence Olivier, people like that. But man, it's a good show. It's the best acted TV show I've ever seen. I'll say that now. Andrew Lincoln is one of my favorite actors. Got a poster of him back there. As Rick Grimes, he would definitely be in the top at Game of Thrones. But if I'm comparing my two favorite shows, Game of Thrones and Walking Dead together, go down the line. Everyone in Game of Thrones is great, and Walking Dead is very top heavy. You got like a few good actors, and then everyone's else like meh. So, anyways, that's what I'm going to say about the acting in Game of Thrones. It's very nuanced. These people know what they're doing. They know their motivations and they know their characters. You cannot say that for every show because sometimes it's just not believable. I believe every single one of these characters' motivations. Let's do a couple highlights here. My first highlight. Okay, so I got two. First one, Jason Momoa. Holy crap, man. His speech, I don't even know. It's the episode where Daenerys gets poisoned or is about to be poisoned. And they kill the guy. Well, they don't kill him, they take him as a slave. And he comes in and gives a speech about his kid's gonna be he's gonna give his kid the Iron Throne, and just, man, goosebumps. It was incredible. And here's the amazing thing, it's in another language. He touched me in my heart, man. He made me get goosebumps in another language. I don't know if there's as many actors who can do that, so big props to Jason Momoa. The second one I'm gonna give second actor I'm going to be giving props to, and when I do this, to keep in mind all these actors are good, but Richard Madden as Robb Stark had this very intense emotional scene, and I talked about it in my episode 10 review, where he just found out his dad was murdered, and he's just attacking this freaking tree with his sword, and it is raw, it is real. And when you're in a fantasy setting and you get a real performance like that, you know you have a great actor on your hands. So those are my two highlights, and overall my marks for the acting in the show. I don't wanna be too like abrupt about it, but when you're the best TV show I've ever seen, you're gonna be a 10, right? It's a 10. We got 2 10s so far. Incredible. Let's touch on the directing. That's the next category we're going to be covering. The directing, although I believe it does too much sometimes, and when I say that, it's like they're trying to do things, not that they're trying to just to help lead the story with brilliant framework, and they do it at times. That's why it's not a big knock, but I did find a small knock in that. But the directing in this is amazing for a movie, let alone an entire TV series. I can't go much into directing just because I don't know enough about it, but what I do know is when I was watching Game of Thrones, I was in awe of the spectacle that they were showing and the way they were showing it, and that goes to the cinematographer and the director. And I think the director, a specific scene I'm bringing up here, did a phenomenal job of portraying emotions, and this is probably one of the biggest scenes that will happen in the whole series, and it's Ned Stark's execution in Baylor, because how he directed it to show the direct eye contact between Arya and Ned, and how Ned looked up to make sure Arya wasn't able to see him being decapitated. They didn't have to say any lines, no stupid cheesy dialogue, they just showed it with directing, and they also had the good acting of Sean Bean. Great. That's just great. You don't get that in movies, let alone TV. So what I'm going to do for Game of Thrones, since I did find one small little speck, one small little grain of sand in a bag of diamonds, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. This show is just amazing, and I can't wait to get on to season 2. But let's continue on with the review. Okay, so we covered the story, we covered the acting, and we covered the directing. Now it's time for a category that we're going to call the rest. So as far as the rest goes, first I'm going to touch on the cinematography. Am I a cinematographer? No. Am I expert in cinematography? No. But what I do know is that this movie looked amazing. Just amazing. Like I always point out, the Lannisters' red tents in their encampment area just looked phenomenal. The old trees, the old religious trees that were carved by the first men, they looked great. Every scene that Jon Snow was in at the wall was always such a great spectacle. They did such a good job of portraying such a massive world, such a massive and beautiful world, and that's a round of applause to the cinematographers. The second thing we're going to touch on is something that you guys helped me see more, was the music. The music is used so well in crafting the story, right? It's used to influence what you're thinking. It's used to foreshadow. And it's also used as just to take your breath away in some scenes where they're showing the scope of the world, right? Where the cinematographer gets these great scenes, or when we're hearing a great speech by General Mormont about how they're going to go and save Benjen Stark. We get this music that it captivates us. It hits us right here, and it makes us enjoy the scene that much more. And people don't understand how important music really is. I mean, we're talking some of the greatest movies of all time, Jaws, Halloween. I know they're 2 horror movies, but some Hollywood greats, right? Take the music out of that. Star Wars, they're nothing. They're crap. I'm not going to say that this show would be crap without the music, but it definitely adds more than the normal audience member would realize. So the music was great. Next thing we're covering in the rest is, something I don't think anyone's ever covered. I really don't, except for unless maybe they're professional TV or film critics, is the casting, right? Like I said, all of these actors are amazing. Top to bottom, there's not really any weak link there. It's just one big strong chain. Well, let's also talk about how everyone looks similar. Who should look similar. Daenerys and the dragon Viserys. Very similar looking. Arya looks like Ned. They say that Arya and Jon are supposed to look the most like Ned. They do. Sansa looks like Catelyn. It's awesome, and I love it. And then you got the Tully sisters. I forget it. Lisa and Catelyn look slightly similar. The Lannisters all look similar. I think it's very, very well done, and I just got to give them props for that because I don't know if they always get the props they deserve. So props to the casting, man. It's phenomenal. The next thing, now, excuse me, one moment, please. Now, and starting in 3, 2, let me guess. 3, 2, 1. Now, let me ramble for a minute here because I just got to talk about something that's going to be included in the rest, and I didn't really have a word for it, but feel, right? And the feeling of Season 1 of Game of Thrones was a similar feeling to what I get when I read a great Arthur Miller play. And that is a tragedy, right? It's building up to something bad. You see this honorable person who's maybe too honorable, who tries to do too much, and it ends in tragedy. And I've said this before. Game of Thrones Season 1 is truly the tragedy of Ned Stark. Now, sure, they're setting up other storylines and trying to progress the story, but it is the tragedy of Ned Stark. And Ned Stark is someone I think most of us can get behind. And I know some of us can't, but I think for the most part we can all relate to how much he loved his family and how much he loved his name and his honor. All of us do that. So I just gotta say, man, the feel of this show was similar to that of a great Arthur Miller play. And you don't get many things that hit you at that level, right? Like, go read All My Sons, go read Death of a Salesman. There's not many things that hit you like that. This is a great tragedy. And it's insane that a TV show can have that effect on me. Game of Thrones Season 1 is the tragedy of Ned Stark. And as someone who's not into that fantasy genre as much and is more into realism, Game of Thrones did such a good job of incorporating a phenomenal story, some terrific acting, some of the best it's ever been in a TV show, some great music, great cinematography, and just some breathtaking directing. They incorporated all of that to make this fantasy world filled with dragons and magic. They made it real, right? And the reason they made it real is because it was filled to the brim with just real life. The best I can explain it is the politics is real. The connections between the families, between the people, the hatred for each other, in some cases, it's real. This is a real world show that's set in a fantasy setting. That it's a giant metaphor for what our world is and what it can become and the corruptness of our world. And it's done so well because instead of focusing on the fantastical, they focus on the realness. They focus on this dialogue that's so gripping. Some of these scenes that we get, the scenes with Catelyn and Robb when they discuss how they're going to kill all of the Lannisters for what they did to their family. It's real. It's real emotion, and it's amazing. And Game of Thrones Season 1 was such an experience, and I'm so glad I gave it a chance because it really has changed my life as someone who loves to enjoy entertainment, and I can only imagine what's going to happen. Well, anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching my little review here. I tried to go as in-depth as I really could without making it too incredibly long, but I think you guys all know my thoughts on Season 1 now and how really impressed I was by it. More impressed than I've been in a long time with something I've watched on TV. So, I mean, thank you guys, too, for inspiring me to keep going and trucking through this. I gotta say that, because sometimes the fantasy stuff just isn't my forte, but really, like I said, this show's more real than a lot of real-life shows that we see, right? It's more realistic than that, because the writers, George R.R. Martin, and the people who adapted the script, the directors and the actors, they realized that this show isn't about the fantastical, it's about the real human connections that are within it. And I love that. So thank you guys so much for encouraging me to keep watching it. Season 2 will be coming real shortly. Before that, I'm going to have a prediction videos out, 5 predictions for Season 2, and that should be a lot of fun. But anyways, guys, excuse me. Peace and love. I'm out of here. Thanks for watching. All night and I'm telling everybody.
party, I'ma get it right. They know what I'm living.